A brutal case of human cruelty. A young boy from China's northern Shanxi province was kidnapped near his home on Monday evening, only to be found hours later wailing in pain with his eyes gouged out in what appears to be an attack carried out by black market organ traffickers. 6-year-old Bin Bin went into the street near his house to play sometime before 6 p.m. An hour or two later, his mother called him inside, but he was nowhere to be found. A farmer found the young boy in a field hours later, covered in blood, his eye sockets empty. Police found the child's eyes nearby. The corneas had been removed. On the way to hospital, Bin Bin told his distraught father what he remembered. His story tells of a woman who drugged him before cutting his eyes out. She apparently said to him, don't cry, and I won't gouge out your eyes." Corneas for corrective eyesight surgery are in high demand as they can be taken from people of any age and any blood type. Anyone who knows where the corneas are located in the eye can extract them. Police are offering a 100,000 renminbi reward for information leading to the arrest of the suspect. With massive demand for organs in China and only limited supply, a thriving illegal organ trade has developed. Children's organs fetch a higher price, one organ trader told Chinese media in 2010. Most people think the younger the donor is, the better the quality of organs, the unnamed trafficker said.
The allegations are blood-curdling. Human organs, like kidneys, allegedly stolen from prisoners of war and political rivals of the Kosovo Liberation Army during Kosovo's war for independence from Serbia in the late 1990s. It's all in a draft report from the Council of Europe. Numerous indications seem to confirm, it says, organs were removed from some prisoners to be taken abroad for transplantation. The report says nearly 2,000 people disappeared during the conflict and have never been found. Even after NATO troops arrived in 1999, it says another 500 disappeared. The report zeroes in on Kosovo's Prime Minister Hashim Thaçi, seen here meeting with Vice President Biden this summer in Washington.
George Washington of Kosovo.
He was the KLA's political head during the 1990s. The report calls Thaçi the boss of a faction with criminal ties. The government of Kosovo says the allegations are false, constructed to damage the image of Kosovo and the Kosovo Liberation Army. It is clear, the government says, someone wants to embarrass Prime Minister Hashim Thaçi. Previous investigations did not yield any proof of organ harvesting by KLA forces. CNN asked the State Department whether the draft report raises new questions.
We take all credible allegations of criminal activity very seriously, and any evidence and sources cited in this report should be shared with competent authorities to conduct a full and proper investigation.
During the Kosovo War, the U.S. and NATO supported the Kosovars. Russia supported Serbia. And the Russian foreign minister said Wednesday Moscow is very concerned about the report. Serbia's ambassador to the United States, Vladimir Petrovich, tells CNN,
"These are some really serious allegations. Allegations of human trafficking, of human organs. And nowadays, I mean, it's just, we're outrageous by these reports, and we're encouraging all the players to step in and do a serious investigation on this."
The report says investigators are not getting enough cooperation either from Kosovo or from neighboring Albania. Investigations of war crimes already are underway, but officials say what's needed now is concrete facts to back up those shocking allegations of stealing human organs. Jill Doherty, CNN, the State Department.
In the shadows. When people have no money, when they have nothing else, kidneys are becoming the only form of currency available to them.
Back in 2018, Sangeeta Kashyap was looking forward to a fresh start. The offer was almost too good to be true. A stable job in Delhi with a generous salary and the dream of building up their savings and retirement fund. The day after her arrival, she was taken to a clinic somewhere in the city. She was told that her employers required a medical check. A few days later, she overheard herself described as a kidney donor during a hospital visit. Despite threats, she took the matter to the police, and her complaint was the spark that uncovered a rampant trade in human organs, involving collusion between organized criminals and corrupt doctors, police and medical administration staff.
But a lot of these people that we would consider the tops of their organized crime rings are doctors. They're not the ones who go out to the villages and convince somebody to sell an organ for pennies on the dollar, but they are the ones organizing this trade.
Nunca una gente que tenga dinero va a vender su órgano. Siempre tiene que ser una gente pobre.
Kashyap's story is by no means unique. Neither is the body trade a purely Indian concern. She was just one potential victim in a global industry that turns over an estimated $1 billion every year. This is the business of crime. And in this episode, we're exploring the global body trade, the ways it operates, and the risks involved for the desperate people at both ends of the deal in what is an unregulated and often perilous market.
It's exploitation at the highest degree. So it's literally people's bodies being taken from them.
Then 2 lakh পার হয়েছিল এগুলা অনেক সংসারের ভেতর কাজ করতে করতে এগুলা সব দিনের মধ্যে আমার টাকাগুলা ঢুকছে ঢুকে আর সে টাকা শোধ করা পায় না
Black market organ transplants have a long and bloody history, but it's only in the last couple of decades that the issue has exploded into a global concern. And there's plenty of money to be made. A clean heart or lungs will likely set you back at least $130,000, with a liver or kidney coming in at under 6 figures. Corneas are cheapest of all, according to the same research, coming in at a mere $30,000.
Every piece of me has the ability to make money on a market. And I'm worth, if I were to sell it, probably somewhere in the order of $250,000.
This is no niche concern. It's estimated that anything between 5 to 10% of worldwide organ transplants involve illegal payment. Kidneys are the most popular, with the WHO estimating that 10,000 are sold every year on the global black market. This is a story about supply and demand, and there are very few places on earth where the latter doesn't outstrip the former. Shortage of organs for transplantation is a constant international problem. In the US alone, thousands die every year waiting for new kidneys. Others, like China, employ even more creative solutions, such as allegedly harvesting the organs of executed prisoners.
The Chinese government says it's reformed the practice. Now they say they only recover organs from volunteers, but some say the practice continues.
They had these, essentially organ conveyor belts where these prisoners would be anesthetized, but still conscious and be completely harvested. They'd harvest their corneas, their kidneys, and end with their hearts. And they would just sort of like liquidate these bodies and then sell them mostly to the domestic market, but also the international market.
Transactions often take place online, with Facebook an enduringly popular marketplace. Others operate through slightly more sophisticated scams. In September 2021, Indian police arrested a Nigerian man in Bangalore. Gregory Yamade allegedly spent 3 years running an elaborate online kidney selling ring, duping poverty-stricken customers with fake websites mocked up to resemble those of some of the country's leading hospitals.
When people have no money, when they have nothing else, they're having to sell their kidneys, so kidneys are becoming the only form of currency available to them.
Some have made the libertarian argument for the body trade. Why should it be illegal when demand is so high? Surely with even the impoverished sellers getting what they need, it's the definition of a victimless crime? This categorically isn't the case. For many, free will and consumer choice have nothing to do with it. Many participants in the body trade are victims of human trafficking, tricked into giving over their organs for little to no pay. Appalling stories are easy to find. In October 2016, Pakistani police freed 24 people from an apartment block in Rawalpindi. They were due to be taken to a nearby hospital for forcible kidney removal after months in captivity.
The police are convinced that most of the people in that apartment were tricked and had no intention of selling an organ when they arrived there. They've arrested 4 people so far, and they've charged them with offences including abducting and imprisoning people. They say they're now searching for 4 doctors who are apparently the kingpins.
Due to its secrecy, the scale of the problem is hard to assess. Naturally, few traffickers publicly advertise their organ farms. In 2018, the UN published a report detailing 700 cases of organ trafficking, which is likely a wild underestimate.
There are no statistics out there that accurately catalog how large the illegal market for organ trading is. It would be ridiculous to think that mafia groups are submitting statistical information to regulatory bodies.
The trade thrives on desperation. Egypt is another country at the front line of the body trade. Refugees make for a captive client base as they pass through on their way across the Mediterranean. Selling organs might be the only means of paying smugglers for uncertain passage.
They were targeted basically because of their financial situation and because they were less likely to report anything to the authorities.
The body trade isn't quite a straightforward tale of winners and losers. Misery certainly isn't exclusive to the sellers. Often buyers end up in hospital with complications of their own following botched or unsafe transplants.
They're not necessarily being screened properly, or they're not necessarily being matched directly with the recipients. There's been studies done with patients who've returned from overseas having purchased a kidney, and they've had a number of health complications, so infections and poor outcomes with how they've received the kidney itself.
Exploitation runs two ways, a fact that illegal organ entrepreneurs are only too aware of. Desperation makes people do previously unthinkable things.
These red markets prey on desperation. It's the value of human life that's on the line here.
Nobody willingly sells a kidney on the black market without seriously dire reasons. Just as surely no one is looking to buy, unless facing a grim outcome of their own. Getting rid of predatory networks, like those who try to prey on Sangeeta Kashyap, is a decent start. But the grim fact is, there's no shortage of others right behind them, ready to take their place in a world where demand for organs far outstrips the legal supply.
The illegal trade of human body parts is worth billions of dollars around the world. This man has agreed to tell his story on the condition we keep his identity a secret. Thank you for coming. At just 35 years old, his kidneys failed. The father of two faced dialysis or death.
My wife, she's a very strong lady. She said, you can't let go.
He remortgaged his home in Sydney to buy a kidney from a donor in the Philippines because the waiting list in Australia was too long.
I was told that you may need to wait 6 to 8 years. So it was a decision for me to go overseas and have the transplant.
Figures show 193 Australians have travelled overseas for organ transplants. Officials say up to half of them were arranged on the black market. New research presented to a global group of doctors suggests China is the most popular destination for illegal transplants, followed by India and Pakistan. Doctors say returning patients are a burden on the health system.
The people who've had transplants will come back with a risky infection that we have a lot of trouble getting on top of.
Online, there are plenty of potential donors and brokers offering organs for sale.
For every illegal operation that happens, there's a donor somewhere suffering and who won't be brought out of poverty and who won't get appropriate medical care.
I know you're going home today, which is great.
Professor Toby Coates is one of a number of physicians calling for mandatory reporting of patients suspected of buying an organ.
A doctor would be required by law to report in the same way that practitioners are obliged to report child abuse.
Nearly 13,000 Australians use dialysis machines like this one. On average, a patient waits 3 years for a kidney transplant, but some can wait up to 7.
If you walk a mile in my shoe, then you will know what's it like.
While he survived to tell his story, other transplant patients might not be so fortunate. Rachel Hayter, ABC News.
It's the second time Jacqueline Johnson cried next to her son Kendrick's grave. The first time he was being lowered into the ground. This time he's being pulled out of it.
Did you ever expect you'd have to exhume his body?
No, I didn't expect to have to bury his body.
In June, Kendrick's body was sent to Florida. The Johnsons hired Dr. Bill Anderson to conduct an independent second autopsy. In that autopsy, Anderson told the Johnsons he'd found evidence that Kendrick died as the result of a blow to the neck and not accidental asphyxia, after slipping into a rolled gym mat at school, as investigators in Georgia had said. But what Dr. Anderson did not find shocked them.
When we got the body for the second autopsy, that organs, the heart, lungs, liver, etc., were not with the body.
The brain?
The brain, they were all absent.
Every organ from the top of Kendrick's head to his pelvis gone, and his family had no idea.
We have been let down again. And when we buried Kendrick, we thought we was burying Kendrick, not half of Kendrick.
I'm not sure at this point who did not return the organs to the body, but I know when we got the body, the organs were not there.
So CNN contacted the two entities that had custody of Kendrick's body and access to his organs: the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which conducted the first autopsy in January, and Harrington Funeral Home, which the Johnsons chose to embalm and prepare Kendrick's body for burial days later. A spokeswoman for the state tells CNN after its autopsy, the organs were placed in Johnson's body, the body was closed, then the body was released to the funeral home. State investigators say it's their normal practice, but what happened after his body arrived at the funeral home was anything but normal.
What was in the place of the organs?
Newspaper.
Newspaper.
Dr. Anderson showed me the pictures of Kendrick's body he'd taken during the second autopsy.
It's a Black Friday ad, JCPenney ad.
Yes.
Stuffing that newspaper in like it was a garbage can inside his body. It's unbelievable.
I'd imagine that that's a different kind of pain.
Yep.
Why do you think that there would be newspaper stuffed in your child?
I never heard of that before. Never.
Neither had the founder of a National Embalming Academy contacted by CNN, who said it's not consistent with the standards of care in the industry. Nor had the president of the National Association of Medical Examiners, who told CNN he's never heard of this practice.
Why would the funeral home discard his organs and stuff them with newspaper?
The question is, why didn't he tell us?
So what exactly did the Harrington Funeral Home do with Kendrick's organs? And why was he stuffed with old newspaper? We went to their office to find out, but their response to us? No comment. However, in a letter to the Johnsons' attorney, Harrington Funeral Home owner Antonio Harrington denies he received Kendrick's organs. He writes in part, his internal organs were destroyed through natural process and henceforth were discarded before the body was sent back to Valdosta. It's another disappointing answer for parents determined to know what happened to their son before and now after his death. And they admit they're struggling.
Unbearable, just about. Only thing that wakes you up in the morning is just to keep pushing.
Victor Blackwell joins us now. This is unbelievable. A newspaper inside this young man's body. I understand there's an investigation into where Kendrick Johnson's organs went and why. What do we know about it?
Well, Anderson, we contacted the Georgia Secretary of State's office because they issued licenses to funeral homes. We wanted to check on the history of Harrington Funeral Home. And when we told them why we were calling, they decided that they too wanted to know where are Kendrick Johnson's organs, and they wanted to know more about this process, this practice of stuffing bodies with newspapers, something that they'd never heard of either.
How was the family's autopsy doctor able to determine the cause of death then?
Yeah, I asked him, if the organs aren't there, how can you determine how Kendrick died? Well, he says that essentially blunt force trauma was not in the organs. It was in the right side jaw, which was actually noted as bruised during the paramedics report on the day he was found. He dissected the jaw, which had not been dissected in the first autopsy, found bleeding under the skin. He dissected the left side as well, did not find the bleeding, and he concluded that that bruising indicated, also with the bleeding, that there was blunt force trauma, that Kendrick took that blow to the neck.
You know, Victor, one thing I hadn't noticed, and actually a viewer who works in gyms noticed and tweeted me about this the other day, was that it looks like all the mats are rolled really tightly, except for the one that Kendrick was found in. That seems to have had a large
action for you. And first at 6, the investigation of a business deal that deals in human body parts shifting from Detroit to Chicago as the feds launch a new raid.
And once again, hundreds of families will be left wondering if the bodies of loved ones have been bought and sold on the black market.
7 Action News investigator Jim Kirchner is here tonight with a story you'll see only on 7. Jim?
Stephen and Carolyn, this case started here, according to sources, when a man named Arthur Rathburn was shipping human body parts through Metro Airport. Get this. The box leaked blood. Those cargo haulers then called for help. Why were you stockpiling hundreds of human body parts here, sir? That's Art Rathburn. And remember his business 13 months ago? For 2 days, federal investigators dressed in hazmat suits removed body parts of 1,000 different people. Arms, legs, heads cut up and kept on ice, not embalmed, so they would be fresh for the black market. Today, the rundown warehouse on Detroit's east side is shuttered and up for sale. Sources say Rathburn's seized records led them to the Chicago area today, a business called Biological Resource Center in Rosemont. It's difficult to see from the outside, but sources say the hazmat suits and raid are underway on the 6th floor of this office building. The same paper trail led investigators to Biological Resource Center in Phoenix last January, and another raid removing body parts and corpses. There were also ties to similar businesses in Las Vegas. Since these dealt directly with the public, families were left without answers. Julie donated her husband Steve's body and was promised his cremated remains back in a month.
Confused and angry. We thought this was going to be doing some good. Yet it doesn't sound like it is.
What do you say to all those families who had no idea their loved ones were in here? Michigan pulled Art Rathburn's license last year after our reporting, even though they were told about his problems 2 years before.
You can go find out what the heck he is doing, and that wasn't done. Right?
Did we do something 2 years ago? No, we didn't. Are we doing an investigation now? Yes, we are.
Are you worried about going to prison? Now, no one has been charged by the feds yet. There are actually 2 locations involved in this raid going on right now in the Chicago area. The offices in Rosemont and the lab in another suburb where they have found body parts. But my sources say this case is winding down, and with this new evidence in Chicago, they can now finish this case after some 13 months.
This is so gruesome. Any idea how many families you're talking about here with loved ones that may be involved?
It's going to depend a lot on the records. It depends if they're talking hundreds or thousands, and with those records that they've seized, and are those records even up to date, or have they been doctored? That could be spelled out in an indictment once it's handed down.
You would not expect it necessarily to be accurate the way it's been handled.
Here in the United States, nearly 4,000 people a year die waiting for a kidney. And while it's illegal almost everywhere in the world to traffic in organs, there is a thriving global market. Yesterday, I spoke with Kevin Sack of the New York Times, who's been investigating the global organ trade. So you've been looking at this for a year. What did you find?
Well, we found that there's organ trafficking really all over the world. I don't know that there's a country that's necessarily immune, including the United States. We had a prosecution here a couple of years ago, the first prosecution of organ trafficking in this country. So it happens everywhere, and obviously it's just because there's this huge demand for kidneys. People are desperate to get these organs and to save their lives.
You focused on Israel, and you say they have actually a disproportionate influence on the global demand. How is that? Explain.
Well, it's kind of remarkable, but over the last 15 years, just time after time, when there have been prosecutions of organ traffickers, Israel always seems to have some role. They're either, Israelis are either the buyers or the sellers, often they're the brokers. And it has a lot to do with a view among some Orthodox rabbis that brain death, which obviously is the optimal circumstance for organ donation, is not actually death. And as a result, organ donation rates in Israel are very low, and people have few places to turn other than the black market.
And they are trying to make some steps to change that, right?
They are. They passed a series of laws in 2008, and the numbers have improved. Significant decrease in the number of people who go out of the country.
And you also looked at where they go in the supply side, and you focused on Costa Rica. Right. What's the circumstance that people are selling their kidneys for?
the way we decided to go about this to sort of illustrate how organ trafficking works was to trace a single network from beginning to end. And this was a network in which Israeli brokers sent mostly, but not exclusively, Israeli recipients to Costa Rica, where a prominent nephrologist would connect them with kidneys sold by poor Costa Ricans.
So there was a price tag. And what about the health outcomes and the surgeries?
Well, there's been some research. It's not terribly conclusive, but the research that has been done suggests that people who go overseas for transplants have higher risks of injury and of organ failure and even of death. And that certainly was the case with this pipeline that we examined. There were at least 2 Israelis who we found who got transplants in Costa Rica who had very poor outcomes.
So I imagine that some of these people are being taken advantage of, the poor people who are selling their kidneys, but it also raises this larger question about the ethics of a marketplace. You tackle that in your story.
Right. Well, you know, these folks have very few choices, and I think when any of us put ourselves in their circumstances of either having to buy an organ or face, say, 5 years on dialysis and perhaps even death before they would get to the top of the wait list, I think people feel that they would do the same thing if it was them or a loved one. And what it really reinforces is how deep the gap is between the supply of kidneys and the demand for them. The World Health Organization estimates that 10% of the need is supplied by the current availability of organs.
Kevin Sack of the New York Times, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
一宗号称中国至今最大非法买卖人体器官的案件日前被大陆媒体揭露出来，其中涉及北京的解放军304医院。不过，外界指出，中共自己揭露这种极少量的黑市犯罪行为，是为了掩盖中共体制真正的犯罪行为。
9月10号出版的《财经》杂志揭露了这宗非法买卖人体器官的案件。这起案件涉及51颗活体肾脏。 涉案金额超过1000万元，被起诉的16名被告包括组织者、中介、掮客和医护人员。知名的军方医院北京解放军304医院也牵涉其中。304医院是部队3甲军医院，有正规的器官移植手术资质。报道说，在医院泌尿科主任叶凌阳的助力下，把黑市器官成功洗白。财经杂志还透露，犯罪团伙的肾源有的是从卖肾者那里摘除。 还有的是从法院出卖死刑犯肾脏后买得的。不过，时事评论员兰树认为，现在中共自曝一些黑市活体摘除人体器官买卖，其实是扰人视听，目的是掩盖中共体制真正的犯罪行为。
当局现在处理一些这种小的、属于刑事犯罪范畴的这种非法的器官买卖，回答不了那种大规模的。 器官买卖的来源在什么地方？这种大规模的器官买卖，它的这个整个过程是怎么样的？这个东西呢，它回答不了。
中国卫生部资料显示，中国每年器官移植数量从1999年的几百起发展到2008年的1万多起。但是根据大赦国际组织记录，在2000年到2005年之间。 中国大陆死刑犯的处决数量平均每年1616人，而死囚器官还受组织配型、冷清血时间等多项限制，利用率不超过30%。中国红十字会统计，中国亲属活体捐献率仅为1.1%，死者捐助器官的比例是100万之0.03。
活摘器官最大面积开始出现的时候呢，是正好是中共破坏法轮功时期，所以它这个是和法轮功是有紧密关系的。 破坏法轮功的政策又是紧密关系的，江泽民说嘛，肉体上灭绝，名义上搞臭，经济上搞垮，这是江泽民破坏法轮功的3个主要的这个政策。
2006年7月6号，加拿大人权律师麦塔斯和前国会议员、人权活动家乔高发表了第一份关于调查指控中共摘取法轮功学员器官的报告。报告得出结论是，从2000年开始。 活体摘取法轮功学员器官的罪恶一直发生，而且遍及全中国。他们认为，至少4万名失踪的法轮功学员与器官移植有关联。9月12号，美国反强摘器官医生协会发言人诺托表示 2000年后，中国器官移植数量以指数般爆炸式发展，并且能够在极短时间内为患者找到器官，说明中国有一个巨大的活体器官库。诺托指出，1999年开始，中共政权迫害法轮功以及迫害的严酷程度，正好与中国器官移植迅速增长相吻合。活摘法轮功修炼者器官的事实已被多位研究者、外科医生以及中共高层官员证实。从第一个控告江泽民迫害法轮功，反被关进监狱5年的朱克明的经历，也说明问题。
我专门问过这个和我们在一起其他的类型的犯人，他们以前也检查身体，但是他们是写名字的，什么什么名字那样的。哎，然而来讲，他这打着这个给这个所有犯人检查身体的名义呢，也给我们检查身体，然后最后真正挨个细检查的都是我们法轮功学员，而且都是编号的，写名字。
朱克明从监狱出来以后，了解到有活摘法轮功器官这个事情，他明白了，他也曾经成了被活摘器官的候选人。朱克明指出，中共的镇压政策导致无数法轮功学员器官被活摘，这是体制的犯罪，不是个别人能干得了的。兰树认为，是到了彻底曝光和制止这个星球上从未有过的罪恶的时候了。
湖南省的小伙子胡杰因为还不起赌债，通过中介去卖肾。这件事情通过媒体曝光后，大陆肾脏器官地下交易中介网络也跟着浮出水面。这笔隐秘交易背后的黑幕是如何操作的呢？请看报道。
26岁的胡杰因还不起1.8万元的赌债，想到卖肾，他很快陷入一张庞大而严密的肾脏地下交易中介网络。通过山东一家卖肾中介，他以一只肾卖4万元成交。手术后，胡杰的银行卡里只打进了2万7千元，而卖肾的患者为这个手术花了30多万。南方周末在报道贩肾网络中表示，胡杰们遭遇的是横跨几乎整个中国的器官贩卖网络，有地下中介、黑势力、正规医院与医护人员参与其中，各司其职又高效运作。广州中山医院副院长何小顺在接受器官捐献迷宫采访时表示，在中国各地军队、公安、武警及2级以上的地方医院大都开展了移植手术。2006年，这些器官移植医院和网站声称等待移植肝、肾等器官的时间只需要几周。2006年3月2号，中华医学会器官移植学会分会副主任委员石秉义教授在中国健康报披露，近10年来，中国已实施各种器官移植9万多例，仅2005年就进行了近1万例肾移植和4000例肝移植。超短的等待时间意味着意外的器官来源。那么这些意外器官从哪里来呢？即使中国每年有几千的死刑犯，也远远达不到这个需求。2006年3月19号，一位叫安妮的医生太太揭露，苏家屯辽宁省血栓中西医结合医院活摘法轮功学员器官，而她的丈夫是摘取法轮功学员眼角膜器官的主刀医生。2006年4月30号，沈阳一位老军医再度披露中共倒卖法轮功学员器官的官方流程。他指出，全国类似苏家屯的秘密集中营至少有36个，位于吉林省的672-S 集中营关押了超过12万法轮功学员和意见人士。中共军方直接参与了器官倒卖勾当，仅他本人经手的伪造自愿捐献器官资料就有6万多份。活体摘取法轮功学员器官牟利的黑幕揭开后，一些海外机构很快着手调查。国际社会公布了独立调查报告《血腥的器官摘取》，关于摘取法轮功学员器官的报告。报告中以18项证据指证，活体摘取法轮功学员器官的现象在中国长期普遍存在。报告说，这是这个星球上前所未见的邪恶。然而，在中共的诱导下，按照行内医生的说法，大陆器官移植地下黑市泛滥成灾，已成为社会不法机构获取暴利的管道。新唐人记者唐岩、黄荣综合报道。
China claims it stopped harvesting prisoners' organs in 2015. But in 2019, the tribunal found that the constant supply of organs available in Chinese hospitals could only be coming from executions.
Makes you think of some grotesque restaurant where you go in and you pick your lobster in a tank. But these are human beings we're talking about.
Chinese surgeon Dr. Enver Tohti was a key whistleblower for the tribunal.
This photo is probably the only photo I can find as a surgeon. This is me.
Once a highly skilled surgeon, he now lives in political exile in London, earning a scant living as an Uber driver.
One day, my chief surgeon asked me, said, "Do you want to do something wild?" He said, "We are going to the execution ground." Oh, I was panicking. Why I'm going to the execution ground? Not only me, the nurse and my assistant, everybody was panicking. What are we going to do? Our job is to save people. Why we are going to go to the execution ground? You can see there are more than 10 people got shot already. And they were wearing prisoner's uniform. And the head was shaved, like mine. And then the bullet comes through here and out from here. So this part is blown away. And they briefed me. Do as quick as possible, remove the liver and 2 kidneys. Then I thought he's alive. My chief surgeon was standing to my left. Said, "Okay, cut here, through that way, go quickly." Because that kind of operation, that things in China is illegal. It is encouraged by the state. We got brainwashed from this kindergarten. So if anybody got shot because he's executed, that means he's enemy of the state.
This is large-scale illegal organ harvesting. And the targets are Uyghurs, Tibetans, Falun Gong members. These are innocent people who are killed by the communist regime. It seems that Falun Gong members, especially, were targeted, had their organs harvested because they live these clean lifestyles with no smoking, no alcohol. We know that in 2006 alone, 11,000 tourists went to China to get an organ. The fact that in China, one can receive a kidney in a matter of hours points out to the fact that China is meeting this demand very probably by killing people. We're very likely witnessing a modern-day genocide, and the international community is not even able to grasp the extent of this possible genocide, because there's a scarcity of information, because international bodies are afraid of China. So if China is not going to be accountable for their deeds, China will become even more powerful and more daring in just challenging the international law. China is like a bull that marches on the world, and destroys a lot in its path.
The report contained some graphic images.
It's a choice no mother should ever have to make, deciding which of her sons might live or die. Both were suffering from kidney failure, but only one of them could receive their mother's organ. I don't know why both my sons are ill, she says. But in the end, the decision was taken for her.
I decided my brother should get the kidney. He's still young and has a better chance of recovery. Everyone has the urge to live. I hope I'll get a kidney soon.
China has a huge organ shortage. It once harvested the organs of executed prisoners. Now Beijing says it will only accept public donations. But the Chinese believe the body should be buried intact, and with less than 1 donation per million people, its donor rates are among the lowest in the world. The patients at this hospital can count themselves lucky. They're among the rare few in China to receive a life-saving transplant. For everyone here, there are thousands of others waiting for an organ, and that huge demand has created a thriving black market. And these are the scars of the trade. Deeply in debt, this 21-year-old says he sold his kidney for £4,000. He doesn't want his identity revealed, but he describes the dark, secretive world where the traffickers operate.
I was blindfolded and driven to a small farmhouse. Inside, there was a full surgical theatre. The woman receiving my kidney was also there. I was scared, but the doctors put me to sleep. I woke up and my kidney was gone. The buyer wanted life, and I wanted money.
Li Haichin also wants life, but will only accept a legally obtained kidney. For now, he gets dialysis 3 times a week. But like many others here, he fears he'll die before ever getting a transplant.
I did not sign up for this. I knew she had to have an autopsy, but this is like remove her, remove this, She was 10 years old.
Rebecca Villarreal has questions.
Preserve each lung. What?
It's about what happened to her adopted granddaughter after she died. 4 days after Elena Castilla died, this memo was sent to the doctor who would perform her autopsy, giving instructions to harvest Elena's organs.
Who are these monsters? These are monsters. Who are these people? I didn't sign no papers. I didn't sign for them to disassemble.
In the letter, signed by Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Sam Andrews, it instructs the doctor to preserve the brain, remove the cervical spine, eyes, and lungs, among other things.
Who is this? Because this is not all of my baby. Because what I'm reading here, this is on my child right here. Remove flesh, hang, preserve the heart. I don't even have raw heart.
We tried to see copies of these autopsies from the ME's office, but no one returned our call. Elena suffered most of her life from the effects of shaken baby syndrome. Rebecca adopted Elena when she was just 1 year old.
She was a fighter. She got that from Grandma.
Rebecca said she was told because of the shaken baby syndrome, an autopsy needed to be done, but she never agreed to organs being harvested.
They literally disassembled my child. She wasn't a manufactured home. She wasn't a toy. She wasn't a doll. She was a person.
It's unknown why Dr. Andrews and the pathology labs requested the organs to be taken out.
In Malawi, they're called Nzungadala, a fake white person, or simply Uzukwa, a ghost. There are up to 10,000 of them, and they claim they're hunted like animals.
People think that our bones, our hair, are some powers that can bring wealth or sometimes can bring luck.
These are people who suffer from a rare, non-contagious, genetically inherited condition which is present at birth, albinism. And here, in this southern African country and elsewhere on the continent, they're discriminated against, abducted, and unbelievably killed for their body parts, which are used in traditional medicine and ritual practices. Edna is the mother of twins born with albinism. Her story is shocking.
Ataoa nyumba anafikira kumenya chiseko, atamenya chiseko nadua masikito, atadua masikito anafikira mwana oja kumugwira pa khosi ndi namene atanigwira pa khosi chochiya ndiye natembenuka ndiye ine naima kera kontaima nthawi mwe anthu aja malimbana ndine mwana oja nawe na ndalimbana nawo pamene atalimbana nawo kera kwataima ndikumutenga mwana oja nane ndiye nazuka ndikumutenga chani ndikumugira mwana uja namugira kumendo iwo anamugira kumutu data namugira chochija kila urajike tapangala gwipanga nawo talimba nawo pamene talimba nawo kena kuwina panja nangotusa mawu kuti ungokhapa kholo ndi anatenga chiponya nandikhamwenene anamuzo amapanga nene amangoti nene ali kuti.
Since 2014, there's been an unprecedented wave of violence against people with albinism in Malawi. At least 18 have died, and 5 others have been abducted and are still missing. The bloodiest month recorded by Amnesty International was April 2016, when 4 people with albinism were reported murdered, including a baby. Even the dead are not left in peace. The Malawi Police Service has recorded at least 39 cases of the illegal exhumation of the bodies of people with albinism, or of people caught in possession of bones and other body parts taken from corpses.
And that has put no fear to terminating life because people are angry for money. They want to be rich in 2 seconds, and the witch doctors tell them something which is difficult to find. So if you want to be rich, find the bones of a person with albinism.
Why? Because throughout Africa, where witchcraft is still practiced, some believe you can only succeed in business through magic, or that bones of people with albinism contain gold, and using their body parts in charms and magical potions could bring good fortune.
It's really pathetic, unheard of, and something we never thought that it can really happen amongst us, and it has really raised fear. And imagine the thought to say, what do I do? Should I lock up in my house? Why should people hunt me like they are hunting for animals to eat?
People with albinism are normal just like us, but they just don't have this component of melanin. That's why their skin color is different from a black person.
ikupezeka buno bufana kuti kuno kwete ndikozi une kuti ndi bakati pachofisi zifana kuti kwatu komwe kwete wina anaphedwa asonzi ya nzangomo.
Women and children with albinism are particularly vulnerable to abduction and killings by criminal gangs that may include even close relatives who see them as soft targets.
Basi chimene chinachitika netanyamuka kupita kumunda nasi hapo ana okha pakhomo pano ndeke nakabasi anabwera nyamata mwana mmozi ndikumamenya kuti amuyingise ndeke naka mwana wina yewa mmanja anamugwira ndikumamuthamangisa kenaka nathamangidwa kumunda anthu anabwerapo kenaka namuthamangisa nyamata uja mwana uja anamponyera pachire anthu anamutola nyamata anamuthamangisa pakana anamugwira atamugwira anthu anamutenga pa ku polisi atamutenga kupita nawo ku polisi pakanafika kuzomba. Amayiwo anabadwa amayi amozi ndiye amayi amene aina wakuluwo zukulu wawo ineyo khala ngati alongwanga abererina Agnes ndipo mtima wako mamuthamanga nthawi imene ku sukulu samakana ulo ku chigayo samakana mtima wako makhala wonjenjemera.
Amnesty International believes that the Malawi authorities' initial response to the abduction and killing of people with albinism was more of a knee-jerk reaction, and they failed to end the violence against this marginalized group.
In Malawi, even parents, real parents are involved in the attacks or involved in setting up the gangs to attack people with albinism. The biggest gap was parents couldn't really understand why we are white in a majority of black society.
They deny, they say the woman has slept maybe with a Caucasian. They don't accept the child because they do not understand. So it's all about lack of knowledge and ignorance. So if our country would take the time to educate the people about this condition, then this can be altogether prevented.
The answer. How many years from?
But there's also another problem suffered by this minority: exclusion and abuse within their own communities, and it starts from a very early age.
My friends and even the other elder people in the community call me bad names, and others would actually stop and look at me to say, why is he white? At that time, I was so young, I could also not even explain why I'm white.
There are also kind of beliefs that we don't live longer, we die, we are like ghosts, we just disappear. So as such, employers won't be ready to get you into employed because they think that 1 or 2 days after, then you just disappear.
Amnesty International is calling on the Malawi government and the international community to take a more active role to protect people with albinism by adopting specific measures to preserve their basic human rights.
This is Bangladesh. Some of the people here are so poor, they're choosing to sell their own organs to make enough money to live and to feed their families. But if you can believe it, that may not be the worst part of this story. MSU's Munir Munirazaman says this may be the worst example of exploitation in history. This is not a happy story, but it is an important story.
We are in a village in Bangladesh where a number of people have already sold their bodily organs. I interviewed a poor rickshaw puller who already sold part of his liver and he did not receive the money that he was being promised. Despite this situation, the government did not take proper action and doctor put a blind eye on it because more transplantation means more profit.
So he says this whole issue doesn't exist. Not officially, and it gets worse. Tough living conditions and little money means people take out loans, but those loans can turn into the reason some put their organs up for sale.
এটা আমার নিজের আর্থিক অবস্থা খুব খারাপ, এনজিওর বহুত টাকা ঋণ ছিল, এনজিওর চাপের কারণে এই কাজটা করেছি আর কি।
গ্রামের মানুষেরা অনেকে, এটা গ্রামের মানুষেরা অনেকে সমাজলে চলে, আর আমরা সমাজের বাইরে কাজ করছি, তাহলে আমরা কি বলবো যে আমরা সুখী?
This is Selena. 4 members of her family have sold a kidney. She says she and her families are outcasts now, shunned by their own community for what they did. And it goes way past the social suffering. This store owner's health has been deteriorating since his surgery.
তারপরে এখন বর্তমান আবার অসুস্থ। আমি বর্তমান আবার অসুস্থ, যেমন এই যে হাতে 5 কেজি জিনিস নিতে পারি না, হাতে 5 কেজি জিনিস নিতে পারি না। যখন 5 কেজি জিনিস হাতে ব্যাগ, একটা সদার ব্যাগ যদি হাতে ধরি তাহলে এই চোখ অসুবিধা হয়, মানে চোখ দিয়ে থিত পাওয়া যায় না, এরকম সহজ ঝরকে পানি পড়ে। এই যে হাত তখন আর চলে না, খুব কম, আর এই পা।
Munir says it's barbaric. It seems like something from some crazy bygone era, but this is right now. And it's the technology and medical advances of right now that are making this possible.
My research explored how new medical technology and the exploitation of the poor intersect within a market economy. So I'm looking at mostly how different forms of bodily exploitation, unlike slavery and prostitution, how the body parts from the poor are being transferred to the wealthy few.
You know, this whole story is just bad. In Bangladesh, it's illegal to sell your own organs. It's illegal to broker those deals. It's illegal to buy organs. Munir found out that last year, some organ sellers reluctantly came forward and told police they'd sold their organs to brokers who stiffed them on payment. Police arrested the brokers, but not the sellers, who were also breaking the law. But guess what? Turns out the brokers with money bribed the cops, and they're back on the street.
যে কাজগুলো করেছে আর যে যত পোষায় মাছ ফাঁসি হওয়ার দরকার, কিন্তু ওরাই তো বেঁচে যাবে, মোর মতো আমরাই, আমাকে নাই পয়সা নাই, আমাকে জেলে পুষতে হবে। যত লোকের ওই পয়সা মারিছে আর যত রকম ক্ষয়ক্ষতি করছে কিন্তু ওর তো ফাঁসি হওয়ার দরকার কিন্তু তাই তো ফাঁসবে না পয়সা হলো বাংলাদেশ হলো পয়সার বুঝছো না
Monir is using his research and the atrocities he's exposing to push authorities in Bangladesh and worldwide to put an end to this. He's getting in front of government agencies, human rights organizations, even the United Nations. But it's hard. And it's complicated.
Abdallah is in pain. He just had one of his kidneys removed.
A friend of mine told me he'd sold his kidney to finance his journey to Europe with his family. I decided to do the same.
After escaping the war in Syria, Abdallah never thought his life could get worse, but it did.
We came to Lebanon 6 months ago with my mum and my sister, and we ended up living on the streets. People were laughing at us.
That humiliation and desperation led him to turn to organ traffickers and to sell his kidney for a few $1,000s. It took us weeks to secure a meeting with the man who organized Abdallah's surgery. He finally agreed to see us, after dark, to tell us more about his booming illegal business.
I dropped the donor at a given place, but not the hospital, because these people don't trust anyone, including me. They take him, they open him up, and take whatever they want from inside. All I know is a donor goes in with 2 kidneys and comes back with 1.
The man known only as Abbas says he arranged dozens of illegal surgeries in the past few months. He says he gets $25,000 for each of them and show no remorse for what he's doing.
I would have no problem selling the whole of Syria if I could. Business is business.
Lebanon is home to 1.5 million Syrian refugees. They are easy prey for organ traffickers. But medical professionals are trying to warn them. Abdel Ghalib works as an assistant at a medical center. One night he saw something he was not supposed to see. A team of doctors conducting an illegal kidney surgery on a Syrian patient.
I want to create awareness for poor Syrian people who are selling their organs or kidneys for unethical people. So I hope they don't sell their organs for the money.
But this message comes too late for Abdullah, who can't wait to get the reward of his sacrifice.
I got $3,000 and they will give me 5,000 more by smuggling me to Europe.
But in a business full of lies, that might never happen.
A simple task, but an exhausting one for Bushra Bibi. 12 years ago, she sold one of her kidneys for $1,000 to pay for her father's medical treatment. He died, and today she's still paying the price for her decision.
I have many problems now. You saw me washing the dishes. I even struggle to sweep. People talk about me when I haven't done my work. But I don't tell them my secret. I gave birth to 5 children. I was in so much pain.
Bushra's story is a common one in this part of rural Punjab, where the poor sell their organs to pay off debts or feed their families. Pakistan outlawed organ trafficking in 2010. Before then, it was believed to be the 3rd most popular destination for transplant tourists. Pakistani law now permits organ donations only if they're voluntary and no money changes hands. That might be the law, but it's still business as usual for organ traffickers.
Uncle, aunt, they don't want to give. Their daughter or son, they don't want, their cousins don't want to donate any organ. Where will that patient, even if he is rich or he is a poor, will with that patient go? What does the government of Pakistan is providing them for any relief? We did not provide any relief to that patient till date. Then how can we expect that we will overcome this illegal trade?
Now pressure is mounting for Pakistan to further tighten its laws. In April, police raided an illegal surgery, arresting doctors, 2 foreigners receiving the organs, and the middlemen who arranged the transaction.
By this raid, we would like to send a strong message to abroad
Pakistani place and hospitals will no further be the safe havens for transplantation illegally.
About 25,000 people suffer of kidney failure each year in Pakistan, but only 10% receive dialysis, and less than 2% are able to get a transplant. Many fear that as long as the demand for organs significantly outstrips supply, poor Pakistanis will continue selling their organs just to survive. Christine Pirovolakis, TRT World.
Desperate for money a few years ago, Muhammad Ahmed sold off one of his kidneys. Through a local Jordanian broker, he underwent the illegal medical operation in Iraq and received $4,500 in payment. Another victim of this particular human organ trafficking gang, working across Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq and Egypt, targeting those willing to do whatever it takes to break out of poverty.
All doors shut in my face. I even considered theft as a lifeline, but I retreated, and the operation was the only solution in front of me. On our way back from Iraq, the Jordanian authorities searched us and made us reveal the scars on our backs at the borders and investigated us later. They knew this was happening, but they just sent us home.
In the shadow of unemployment and rising prices, poverty pockets continue to grow in Jordan, forcing many to succumb to their harsh socio-economic realities. Laws still have very little impact on curbing human organ trade and punishing those involved.
We should not throw the blame on the insufficiency of the law, but the need for raising social awareness through education campaigns about the consequences and dangers of such a practice is real.
Meanwhile, some politicians say the laws are there but are not being followed strictly enough.
I demand that the government become more alert of the practice of those criminals who exploit the poverty and weakness of people and operate on them under unhealthy circumstances. And there needs to be more regional cooperation between governments of countries attracting sellers and those where surgeries are being performed illegally.
Observers say the black market in human organs is growing in Jordan, and until tougher action is taken against the criminals, they will continue to target the most vulnerable and desperate of Jordan's poorest neighborhoods and camps. Nisreen Al-Shamaili, Al Jazeera, Amman.
Meet Mohammed. He's 20, lives in Cairo and has no fixed income. A few months ago, a stranger approached him, gained his confidence, and promised him a job where he'd earn $3,000 a month.
This guy offered me a job in Sharm el-Sheikh. He says I had to have a health check and took me to hospital. It was a Friday at 10 a.m. They put me to sleep, and the next morning when I woke up, I had tubes sticking out of my side. They tried to convince me that I'd fallen on a piece of glass.
In fact, one of Mohammed's kidneys was removed. A victim of organ trafficking, he's now seeking justice with the help of a lawyer.
This happened to Mohammed because he knows nothing about life and is poor. Mohammed didn't go to school, so it's very easy to dupe him.
Mohammed wasn't given a choice, but some Egyptians are voluntarily selling their kidneys. Demand is high, and those in need of a transplant are prepared to pay as much as $50,000 per kidney.
There's advertisements in newspapers for small ads saying if you want to sell your kidney.
Illegal transplants are common, but the authorities have decided it's time for a crackdown. In recent weeks, several private clinics in Cairo have been closed down.
What we want is to avoid Egyptian citizens becoming commodities, products, or spare parts for foreigners.
A strict law which would see those involved in organ trafficking severely punished should be voted on in the spring. But the draft was drawn up 10 years ago, and politicians keep coming up with delaying tactics.
Egyptian hospitals and officials at the Yemeni embassy in Cairo were part of an elaborate organ trafficking ring operating since 2014. An Al Jazeera investigation has revealed. Desperate Yemenis traveled to Egypt to sell their kidneys for an income with the help of a Yemeni broker.
They didn't give me time to recover. I lost everything, and I'm still facing complications to this day.
The black market for organ trafficking in Yemen began to thrive after the 2014 war.
Of the 1,000 we interviewed, 900 had sold their kidneys and come back to Yemen as brokers looking to find new victims.
Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East, with half of its population living under the poverty line. One victim said he sold his kidney for $5,000 to an Emirati woman who paid $50,000 to traffickers. The World Health Organization lists Egypt as one of the top 5 organ traffickers in the world. And although the government has in the past arrested doctors and nurses involved in organ trafficking, the business is still big. The Yemeni Organization for Combating Human Trafficking revealed that one Egyptian hospital has appeared in its list of organ trafficking cases multiple times, while the El Nil Hospital is said to belong to the General Security Apparatus.
The Mukhabarat Hospital is typically used for Yemeni donors, and the receiving patients are usually Saudis and other foreigners.
The sale of organs is legal in Yemen, but illegal in Egypt. Officials at the Yemeni embassy in Cairo falsified documents required by Egypt to prove the donors and the receivers are from the same country and related.
When we presented the embassy with our evidence, they acted like they would do what was necessary, but they didn't. The embassy is still involved to this day, because this business makes them a lot of money.
Egypt now, a Cairo criminal court has sentenced 41 Egyptians to prison for trading in human organs. They and others are believed to be part of an organ transplant mafia that recruits patients to purchase their organs. In recent years, the government has arrested and imprisoned dozens on similar charges. Here's Adel Al-Makhroui with more.
From 3 to 15 years in prison and with up to $28,000 in fines for each defendant, Cairo Criminal Court has reached a conclusion that more than 40 Egyptians are guilty of human organ trade. The prosecution has confirmed that at least 29 surgeries of kidney transplants made to foreigners were in fact paid for organs instead of donations, as official hospital reports indicated. 20 doctors, 12 nurses and 9 brokers formed what is so far is the biggest organ trade mafia known in Egypt. Investigations have shown that organs have been purchased from Egyptians and African refugees here for as little as $500, while foreign patients pay up to $120,000 for the transplant. Patients selling their organs then file documents claiming they are donating their organs, as trade is banned in Egypt. For years, numerous reports from the United Nations and rights organizations have indicated that organ trade in Egypt was spreading, to the extent that has put the country among the world's top 10 in organ trafficking and trade. For years, the Egyptian government has been tracking these organ traders. Dozens have been arrested in the process, yet there is still high demand for this illegal but life-saving operations. Organ transplant is an extremely complicated process in many countries. Rights organizations say this will keep fueling this illicit trade in many countries with high poverty rates like Egypt. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
FIA की बड़ी कार्रवाई में बड़े इंकशाफात, शहरियों के अगवा के बाद गुर्दे निकालने का इंकशाफ, यंग डॉक्टर्स एसोसिएशन का ओहदेदार साथियों समेत गिरफ्तार।
FIA की बड़ी कार्रवाई में बड़े इंकशाफात हुए हैं, शहरियों को अगवा के बाद गुर्दे निकालने का इंकशाफ हुआ है और यंग डॉक्टर्स एसोसिएशन का ओहदेदार साथियों समेत गिरफ्तार कर लिया गया है।
EME सोसाइटी में ओमान से आए मरीजों के गुर्दे गैर कानूनी तौर पर पैबंद किए जा रहे थे। छापामार टीम ने डॉक्टर फवाद और डॉक्टर अल्तमश को गिरफ्तार कर लिया। मुल्जमान से तफ्तीश के दौरान चश्मकुशा इंकशाफात सामने आए। जराये के मुताबिक गिरफ्तार डॉक्टरों ने राहगीर को अगवा करने के बाद जबरदस्ती गुर्दा निकाल लिया। आमिर नामी शख्स का गुर्दा गैर मुल्की शहरी को फरोख्त किया गया और इसको डरा धमका कर 1 लाख रुपए गुर्दे के इवज दिए गए।
So we're in the town of Kalai. Some towns in Bangladesh are known for having steel, some for making rice. Kalai is known for producing kidneys.
Every person we met seemed to say the same thing.
আমাদের এলাকা অনেকেই দিছে আর কি। এটা যদি কারো ক্ষুধা থাকে, ক্ষুধা মিটানোর জন্য যেভাবে মানে আগাতে হয় সেভাবে আমি আগাইছি আর কি।
Are you the only person in your family who sold your kidney?
না, আমার ভাই করছে, আমার ছোট ভাই করছে, আমার বাবা করছে, আমার ওয়াইফ করছে।
করার পরে লাস্টে যাদা এই কামটা আমি করেছি যে আমার তো কোনো উপায় নেই, এইভাবে তো দুটা মেয়ে বিয়ে দিতে পারবো না আমি
তো অভাবে দিছি আমার দুইটা মেয়ে, তারপর লেখাপড়া করান খাওয়ান।
And not surprisingly, these black market surgeries have severe, often debilitating health consequences for the donors.
আমার শারীরিক অবস্থা বলতে আমার শারীরিক অবস্থা খুব খারাপ, প্রস্রাব জ্বালা যন্ত্রণা করে। যদি সে ধরনের কোনো ভারী চাপের কোনো কাজ করি তাহলে ব্যথা করে।
দিয়ে তো অসহায় হয়ে গেছি। and ভুল করে ফেলে দিছি।
Beyond, the Mumbai police busted a countrywide kidney racket on Tuesday, a chase that led them to Chennai, where a prominent doctor was arrested on charges of illegally performing 3 surgeries. But the racket has just highlighted how desperate thousands of patients are in waiting for organ donations. It's a wait that can lead people to take extreme measures.
India's infamous kidney bazaar back in focus after the arrest of a top Chennai nephrologist accused of running a countrywide kidney racket. A racket that thrives because there are people in desperate need of organs. The 1994 Transplantation of Human Organs Act legalizes brain death and permits removal of organs from brain-dead cadavers. But there are not enough cadaver organ donations, forcing patients to resort to illegal means like paying money to buy organs from living healthy people.
Where will they go? They have to have the kidney, isn't it? They have a right to survive, so they will be taking the kidney from anywhere because it's a desperancy from the recipient side.
Every year there are 3 lakh new people who suffer kidney failure, but since donations are limited, the number of people waiting keeps growing. Until 2 years ago, there were as many as 15 donations annually in Mumbai. This year there have been just 4. Part of the problem is that hospitals are not actively pursuing the cause. In Mumbai, there are 21 hospitals which carry out transplants, but only 3 have a team of transplant coordinators who are dedicated to the job of offering counseling to relatives of brain-dead patients about organ donation. Tuesday's arrests of 5 people who admitted to carrying out 200 illegal transplants in 5 years exposes how well entrenched the organ trade is despite active policing. A racket where both the donor and the patient are equally victimized. In Mumbai, Shai Venkatraman for NDTV.
Anywhere from 10 to 15% of all organ transplants are illegal. This is an exploitation of the human condition that has to stop.
To sell an organ, it's a terrible thing. But on the other hand, maybe it saves your life.
Kaya ako magpapakuha ng bato dahil kailangan kong mayawon yung pamilya ko sa kahirapan dito.
One of the significant figures in this case is Dr. Yusuf Somnez.
I'm doing my surgery, that's it.
I really only have 3 choices at this point. I either get a transplant overseas, I get a transplant in this country, or I die.
Poverty, vulnerability, and destitution generate a supply of individuals who are targeted or resort to an organ sale. Dire financial circumstances led Yusuf and later Safiya each to resort to selling their kidney for a small sum of approximately 11,000 Egyptian pounds.
كان ضمنت والدتي واخويا في معرض من اللي بيدوا السلع المعمرة دي، وما حدش منهم دفع وما كانش ليا اي تصرف ولا كان ليا اي مهنة ساعتها.
انا لقيت الظروف كلها هو مش قادر يشتغل، بس انا لقيت الظروف كلها ان انا مفيش وما معيش، ولادي تعبانه نايمين معلش على حته كوبرتا، وكنا في شقه بتنشع ميه هنا برضو في نفس البلد دي، ومعيش فلوس ادفع الايجار، ومفيش اكل ولا فيش شرب ولا فيش شغل، مفيش ده كله.
دخلت من الساعه 1 بالليل، خرجت 6. هما بينقلوا لي مفيش رحمه. فوق كانوا بينقلوا لي من على السرير اللي هو بيمشي بينا ده، بدل ما تنقلني بالراحه رزعتني. مش قادره اقول لك بعد الرزعه دي انا عملت ايه، بقيت اصرخ خلاص، بقيت طلت مش قادره مش طايقه. وفي نفس الوقت المشمع كان في مشمع اسود كده كان غرقان دمي مني، لان كانوا ملبسيني مريالة خلف خلاف، واحده كده وواحده. جم يشيلوا لي المشمع، اول وقفه ليا وقعت منهم ما قدرتش.
كان شديد، الم كان شديد، يعني كان جنبي من هنا كده كان وجعني مش قادره، مش بعدين مش صلبه نفسي كده. قعدت 13 يوم وانا نايمه في السرير، محدش.
لقيت نفسي بتعب من اقل مجهود، حتى شغل ما بقتش قادر عليه، ما بقتش واصل فيه باستمرار. اشتغل يوم 2 3 اقعد قدامه اسبوع، اجي اقوم الاقي جسمي تعبان فما اقدرش اقوم. فطبعا صاحب المحل اللي انا فيه او كلام اي حد شغال معاه، ما فيش حد بيستحمل حد دلوقتي، فبالتالي بيجيب واحد مكاني، فبالتالي بضطر ان انا اقعد تاني في البيت. فرجعت نتائج عليا صعبه.
44-year-old Mohammed Nazel has been waiting for a new kidney for 20 years. Now he's too sick to survive a transplant. Years of dialysis have ruined his veins, and he spends most of his time in the Singapore hospital.
So this part, all this part, they'll take all the vein. So right now, I got two chances. If I go to dialysis, I will not last long. I will need the transplant. So if I go for transplant, I got no vein. The blood will never go flow to my body properly. That's what the doctor told me.
Mohammed Nazel is one of more than 600 people in Singapore waiting to receive a new kidney. Many will die before a donor is found. Retail magnate Tang Wee Sung is accused of taking matters into his own hands and trying to buy a new kidney illegally. He was caught and now faces trial and up to 3 years in prison.
Sorry, won't be taking questions at this time.
The Indonesian man who offered to sell his kidney to Tang was jailed for 2 weeks. This is where he comes from, a small town on the island of Sumatra. Here the local mafia controls the illegal organ trade with Singapore. Salim was 22 years old when he sold 7 centimeters of his liver. He became a rich man, buying cows and goats. He told us his story, but he didn't want to be filmed. In poor villages like these, people have become so desperate that they're selling their own organs. They don't want to be filmed, but they've told us that they never regretted that drastic decision. And if it would be legal, even many more people would do exactly the same thing. The local gang leader tells us he's very keen to do business if Singapore decides to legalize organ trading and if Indonesia agrees to cooperate.
Poor people are being abused anyway. They are selling their souls to earn money. Why wouldn't they sell their organs if it's legal? I'm sure it would be busy. We can even start a shop selling organs, and I'm very interested to run it.
But the possibility of trading the organs of poor Indonesians have not gone well with the Indonesian government. The health ministry calls the idea sinful. But on several Indonesian websites, people are already offering their kidneys for sale. In Singapore, the past president of the Medical Association doesn't see any ethical constraints.
Ethically, how can you say thousands of people are dying from kidney diseases? Because people today live longer. So those with kidney disease live longer. So instead of thousands of them, there'll be tens of thousands of them. Are you saying they should die?
Mohammed Nazel is one of those patients who is dying. Still, he would never buy a kidney from a poor person, even to save his own life. Step Fasen, Al Jazeera, Singapore.
National Police Chief General Badruddin Haiti says Indonesia needs a specific regulation on organ donor following recent findings on illegal organ trade.
Regulasi bagaimana seseorang kalau ingin mendonorkan organ tubuhnya, bagaimana orang kalau memerlukan pendonoran, itu carinya di mana supaya masyarakat itu tahu, sehingga tidak terjadi jual beli seperti ini. Nah, oleh karena itu harus diatur, ada regulasi yang bisa menempatkan di mana masyarakat mau mendonorkan, di mana masyarakat itu mau mencari pendonor yang memang siap. Ini saling membutuhkan. Kalau tidak ada yang mempertemukan ini, nanti akan liar sehingga terjadi jual beli.
According to African and Italian news agencies, illegal organ trade is flourishing across large parts of northern and sub-Saharan Africa. The reports also claim that most of the victims are of Eritrean or Sudanese nationalities. As this footage by the Italian coastal guards show, hundreds of Eritreans are trying to reach Europe by the sea. Human trafficking mafia would charge them up to 200,000 euros for taking them to Italian and Spanish shores. But those who can't afford the cost could sell their organs. Lack of established rules about organ transplants in Europe and Africa has been problematic.
When there is a donor, there is also a receiver. It is not clear if organ mafia performs analysis for the compatibility of organs. Unfortunately, organ trade is a reality, but that does not mean Africa should be stigmatized.
Illegal organ trade has seen a rise across many conflict-hit countries. It is the second most profitable illegal trade after drug smuggling. The ISIL terrorist group has been involved in selling organs from kidnapped Iraqi and Syrian nationals.
Ce qui me gêne, ce n'est pas la question si tout se vend.
What bothers me is not whether there is organ trade, because it is happening even in Europe. This is a global problem, and Africa is being pinpointed as the reason for all problems in the world. Organ trade is a problem in Africa, but is not the sole responsibility of Africans.
Earlier this year, the Italian parliament enforced a law punishing mafia dealing in human organ trade. However, it remains to be seen whether other countries will follow such an act or not. Mr. Pride Press TV, Paris.
Now, this is a story that will leave you shocked. In Kanchipuram, a man hospital has been accused of organ trading. The inmates in the hospital claimed that they've been brought directly from hospitals and are often unaware of where they are being taken. It has now been alleged that the hospice sells organs of the deceased. However, a church has rubbished all the rumours, claiming that it's an attempt to sensationalize the entire matter. The hospice came under the scanner after their ambulance was caught by locals transporting 2 patients and a corpse along with vegetables. A van disguised as ambulance was spotted by motorists in Kanchipuram after an old woman from inside cried for help. It was found that there was a corpse packed along with vegetables in the van.
It's all about the protest against the government and the people of non-Christians. Those are working against the institutions what we are serving for the poor people and the destitutes and other people.
All the allegations, all the finding fault are all wrong. It was proved actually, but they don't like that we are doing all these things. No, they're trying to stop that one. Because minorities are looked down upon now, they don't want to give us any chance.
The basic premise with which this was started itself is wrong. The irregularities which have been cited have absolutely no evidence. If you are talking about the entire grave, there has been a proper permission that has been obtained for this, and this is a hospice.
This is more a kind of a protest in order to bring the real truth, to bring the truth to light. All the necessary papers are available for this hospice to run, except I believe the sanitation certificate, for which they have already applied, but the government has not given, and the problem is with the government and not with the hospice. If they are doing like that, we can clearly say it is against the Christian minorities. Those who called those against the Christians is doing that. Maybe the central government or state government has to answer. My question is state government has given any document about this?
Every year, an estimated 10,000 operations involving illegally purchased human organs are carried out. That's more than 1 organ sold every hour. Most of those organs are kidneys. And while nearly 100 countries have taken steps to halt the black market traffic in human organs, there is evidence of a surge in some countries, including the Philippines. Barnaby Lowe has the story.
As a tricycle driver making less than $8 a day, 29-year-old Rex Manay could only dream of a life far from the poverty he grew up with for his family. So when he was offered $3,000 in exchange for one of his kidneys, he grabbed the opportunity without any hesitation.
It was an easy decision to make because the one making the offer had also sold his kidney. He was very convincing.
But it wasn't nearly as easy as he thought it would be. For 4 months, he was holed up in a safe house while constantly having to take tests to find a patient who matched his kidney. And when he finally did, the money vanished quickly, and his health, he says, deteriorated.
I rarely got sick before. Even when the rain is pouring or there's a storm and I have to be out, I never got sick. But now, a few raindrops and I cough. If I could just turn back time, I wouldn't sell my kidney.
In an effort to crack down on what was then a growing black market for human kidneys, the Philippine government banned foreigners from having their kidney transplants in the country back in 2008. The ban was widely thought to have curbed the illegal trade of human organs. But it appears now that the practice persists, especially in poor rural communities.
Over 450 known cases in 3 towns in Rex's home province of Quezon alone.
Some of them haven't been operated on before the ban, others as recently as 3 months ago. They claim to have undergone the procedure in some of the most well-known hospitals in Manila, where doctors allegedly make over $20,000 for every transplant. The government acknowledges the prevalence of the underground organs trade, but says it's been difficult to pin down those involved.
All of them go through a process. An ethics committee evaluates every donor-recipient pair. Unless approved, it is not done.
With millions around the world suffering from kidney failure, the demand far outnumbers the supply. And as long as there are patients who have money and people desperate for money, organ trafficking is likely to remain a lucrative business. Barnaby Low, CCTV, in Quezon Province, the Philippines.